This morning I am in Denver, Colorado, downtown area, in fact, at the Supreme Court building and library. And I'm speaking with Daniel B. Cordova, who is the Supreme Court of Colorado law librarian. Dan is also the executive director of the Colorado Legal Help Center, which is a website designed to assist pro se litigants in navigating the legal system and access thereto. Dan is accustomed to begin these conversations by asking about you as a person as opposed to just a colleague. I mean, we're both, but it's interesting to hear about both. So could you tell us a little bit about your life, not only perhaps today, but even when you were young?
Happy to do that, Pat. Thanks for asking. I was born in Colorado, in a small town in this kind of south central part of the state called Trinidad. It's on one of the spurs of the Santa Fe Trail, actually. I lived there until I was 3, and at that point my parents divorced and we became a part of a blended family, and I grew up in Reno, Nevada.
Reno, that would have been a bit of a difference.
It worked out well for us. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to have a good education, support a family, not be separated from my brothers and sister. And I was ultimately adopted and went to Hug High School. Proctor R. Hug was a judge and also a politician in the state of Nevada.
Well, I know in Nevada, you have Las Vegas at one end of the state and then Reno at the other, and those are the two major population centers in that state. And the rest of it, which my son and I were on this trip today that brought us here. He's traveling with me next weekend. We're going to drive through that state, but we're taking the desert route up through, eventually through eastern Oregon, back up to where we live in Washington State.
Oh, good.
Which is a route I've never taken. I've been to Reno and I've been to Salt Lake City. Now I'm in between.
So you'll take Highway 50?
50, I think it is.
Right.
Yes.
No, you'll enjoy the state. It was a great place to grow up. I'm a Western boy, to be sure, and it served me well. So I grew up there, and when I was 18, I left to go to the east to college. I went to Georgetown University for 2 years.
A reputable institution in Washington, D.C.
Excellent education, excellent experience, and a lot has happened between then and now. But today, I'm married to a wonderful woman by the name of Julie, and she's a doctor, pediatrician actually.
Oh.
We have 2 beautiful daughters, twins, Kira and Tegan, and so that makes my heart sing actually, to just even think of them, and they make me a better person, to be sure.
Well, you mentioned, I think off camera, that you're all sailors, or the daughters are at least, of some sort.
So Kira and Tegan would like to go to Maritime College in landlocked Colorado, but they are they're all in. You get the bug, and you have it for life, is what I hear. And we visited colleges, and next year we expect them to matriculate to one of them.
Yeah, well, after they get all graduated, you can get a nice big raise without having to ask your boss.
It's going to be fun to see where they go, to be sure.
I have a nephew who went to the California Maritime Academy about 20 years ago. And he is now a master and actually commands ships at sea, and is in the process of trying to become a pilot on Puget Sound, which is where we live and he lives.
My goodness, so that's the school in Vallejo. We visited it, and it's an impressive place.
Yeah. Well, he's been fortunate in his career because he moved up fairly rapidly. And now if he becomes a pilot, I'm trying to think of the word again, he will not be away from home months on end like he is when they're at sea on a ship.
Right.
That'll be quite a change. Oh, I certainly wish your daughters well.
Thank you.
And you and your wife well too, and having them aspire to moving on into the world as adults. That's always nice.
And, well, your work's never done as a parent, as you know, but we'll get to know them on another level.
It's nice, yeah. Okay, well, one of the things I like to ask sort of in follow-up is, do you have any hobbies or any special passions or other pursuits that you occupy your time? outside of work, of course, in case the Chief Justice watches.
I do. I am fascinated with foreign language. I have a library at home, not just of foreign language, but also other subjects. I'm constantly referring back to that small library for reference purposes, whether it be historical topics or geography. I love puzzles. I like to consider everything in life a puzzle. I think librarianship is very much like that. As well, I'm a former martial artist. I have a black belt, studied a number of systems. I have a small segment of the library dedicated to that. And even though I don't practice anymore, it's internalized really into a lot of who I am. I'm also fortunate that my wife allowed me to take a sommelier class, and so I hold a certificate in that area, and so we drink wine together and enjoy that as well.
Why not?
Yeah, as well as travel, and then you put all those things together, and that doesn't leave a whole lot of time outside of work.
Well, I imagine we both have fairly demanding jobs. She would as a physician, a pediatrician, you would as the head of this library, and all the things we end up doing in that sort of role. And yet it is nice to have a little time on the side for just enjoying life.
It reminds me of how much is out there. It also reminds me of the ways in which we connect with our communities. That's a big part of what I do here, and so I don't want it to be any different in my personal life.
Good. Well, we've sort of gotten to know you now as a person, Dan. Let's talk about your career, beginning with your academic pedigree. Could you tell us what your degrees are and where you got each of them?
Sure. So I mentioned that I started college at Georgetown. Didn't finish there, and there are often times when I wonder what life would have been like had I done that. It was an excellent education to be sure, but I was offered a full ride scholarship to come back to the University of Nevada in Reno to be on their debate team.
Oh, a debater.
So in that second summer, I thought long and hard about that and stayed home. There were some other reasons associated with family that made that an easier decision than it probably sounds. But that's where I got my first degree. My bachelor's degree in speech communication was at the University of Nevada, Reno, where I grew up, and had a great time doing that. I jammed 4 years of education into 5, and then went straight into law school in Boulder. Graduated there in 1989, and through twists and turns ended up at the University of Arizona in Tucson to get my master's in library and information science in 1998.
So you're really kind of a southwestern United States type instead of the east where you started college.
I love to travel. I've been to almost all 50 states at this point. I'm trying to do that for my children too. There's something to recommend every place, but I truly do like the West and the mountains in particular. Yes.
Now, I'm assuming you travel by car then on some of these trips. Is that a road trip type travel, or is it something more like flying and getting a...
So it used to be more road trip. Now I have the luxury of traveling by plane more and then maybe renting a car. But,
I do both. Both versions, but I enjoy the long road trips and seeing places along the way.
No, I do too. And you talked about living in Washington. I have a cousin who owns Cloud Mountain organic farm and vineyard up there. She and her husband Tom. And I have to tell you, I mean, you live in a beautiful part of the country as well.
To be specific, this is I lived in Washington, D.C. for 30 years and worked there. I'm in the other Washington now, as they call it back there. And likewise out in the Seattle area where I do live, the other Washington is the one in the east now. So I had to get used to the terminology.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, you are now the Supreme Court Law Librarian and have been actually since, according to my notes, December about 2006.
That's right.
Now, that was sometime after you got your degrees, as I recall. So can I ask you what you did in the meantime? Maybe practice law or something?
You may. So when one gets out of law school, the logical thing to do is to practice law, and I attempted that for a couple of years. And you kind of get your feet into it and figure out whether or not that's the match you thought it was going to be. And for me, it really wasn't. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the people I worked with. But every day I didn't wake up thinking, wow, I get to go to work today and do the thing that I love the most. And yet, I have a very strong connection with the law. I feel strongly about justice, access to justice, all of those things that you would expect a law librarian to care about. But back then, I hadn't even considered librarianship. So in those years, I thought long and hard about what my future was going to look like. Took a long, hard look at the student loans I had and the loans that my wife was going to have, and I made the decision to go into the Army to pay off my student loans.
Oh.
I went in at age 29 as an enlisted soldier, and they went to training. They sent me overseas. When I came back, my wife was finishing medical school and was scrambling for an internship and a residency, and that took us out of state to Iowa City for a year, and then to Tucson after that for a residency. And that's where I went to library school. And then when you're in another state with a law degree in one and a license, you think twice about taking more than one bar exam if you're not good practice.
I understand that fully, since I never took any more bar exams than the first one.
There you go.
I made it past that. I wasn't going to volunteer again.
Right. So that was really kind of the drive. Librarianship was the decision that I made to actually be Solomonic about it. Right. You love the law, but what part of the law do you love the most? It was the research. It was the solving of the puzzles. It turned out to be a little bit of a superpower for me, and so I parlayed that into librarianship. I worked as a public librarian for 5.5, 6 years in the Tucson Pima public system. It was a fabulous start to this career, and there are still people there that I think very fondly of and am indebted to for their assistance. And then our children were born. Our family was back here in Denver, and when you have twins, you seek help. So we came home, and in that period of time, I was then thinking, how could I bring the law back into my work? A position was listed at the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in the other side of downtown Denver for a reference librarian. I applied for that along with 39 other lawyers. Somehow I was preferred, stayed there for almost 6 years, and then this job came up.
Well, you've sort of seen both sides of the public services side of your library, since you're front line in the reference, and sort of the back office a little more probably now as the head of the library.
You know, one of the things that we look for here is what do people love, but we also look for those types of deep dives. I was really fortunate at Tucson Pima to be able to start as a page, putting books away on a shelf, right, and work my way up through the different job descriptions to the point where there really isn't much under the umbrella of librarianship that I haven't had an opportunity to experience firsthand.
Okay, that
certainly
sounds
served us
well.
Yeah.
Good. Now, I always like to follow up and ask if there's anyone in particular who may have played a role in helping guide you into our niche of the profession.
You know, there was. So, but when we talk about our profession, I like to divide it up between the public component of what we do in law libraries and the public libraries themselves. And in my particular case, they were distinctly different people. In public law librarianship, Daphne Daly was a strong influence on me. She was a branch manager that I got to work for under Agnes Griffin's tenure as director there, who was also a wonderful lady and let me work on a strategic plan for that system back in the day. But both of those two ladies are huge influences in my development. The entire reference team at headquarters in downtown Tucson were phenomenal. We had an info line back then and a wheel of resources, and we would have 3 minutes to answer any question that came in next, and we would have shifts. It was just a tremendous way to really be immersed in what libraries can do that people might not know about, and to take pride in it. And then there were a couple of gentlemen who also did IT work in the early days as it related to librarianship. Lynn Bevel, who's now retired, was an amazing crossover librarian in my estimation. I still am in touch with him when I can be. And then Phil Heikkinen was our IT director, but also a librarian. He's now the director at Orcas Island out there near you.
Oh, up near me, yeah.
And those two guys were also tremendous.
It's a small world.
It
We
is a small
keep
world.
reconnecting.
Yes.
Yes, that's interesting. Now, I assume some of these people would also have served as mentors to you, or is that correct? Or is there anybody else that you?
Absolutely. So, mentoring, being a protege, I consider that to be a big part of what we do every day.
Yeah.
And so I like to think that I've learned from a variety of different people. These folks absolutely fall into that category. But personally, I have to divide it up between, family. I have to divide it up, specifically in the law with regard to my uncle, Donald Cordova, who was a lawyer here, and then a federal judge. We lost him, over 10 years ago, maybe 12 now, and we miss him every day. I mean, he was a tether for me, not just in the law, but also in many other ways.
He was probably very pleased to see you go in the direction you did with the law.
He was indeed, and
Yeah.
he was a driving force for me wanting to be successful in doing that.
Well, he wasn't a librarian then, a law librarian. He was a judge, but we have colleagues who have had relatives senior to them who were actually even in our own immediate niche as law librarians.
Right, and I have to tell you, I mean, I mentioned, Proctor Hug Senior, the namesake of my high school being a judge. I mean, it's funny how life comes around to us, and we might maybe realize it at the time, the importance of it. But I should also mention that we are fortunate beyond my ability to tell you here, the 30 plus judges who are in residence, the 7 Supreme Court justices, 22 active Court of Appeals judges, and our seniors, the support that they give us. If that's not mentorship, it's very close to it, because including us in their work is the highest compliment that they can pay us. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention them. I'm sorry I can't do it by name because of time constraints, but I should also say, apart from family, it's very rare for people to have that kind of an effect on your life, to give you the opportunity to do what you do best, and I thank them as well. And there's one other person I would call out here at the court. I lost a brother, and I miss him very much.
Oh, sorry about
too.
that. Yeah.
It's a part of life for many people, and I could say many things about what I miss about that. Mostly I'm pleased to be able to help others in the way that he started doing that. He was a part of the Gallup program with the Strength Finders leadership publication, and we'll get back to that a little bit later with another question, I think.
Yeah.
But I was very fortunate when I came here to meet a gentleman by the name of Chris Ryan. And, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that he's the brother I found, right, here. And specifically with respect to his ability to see into our work and to support it, linking it up to our top level client judges and what have you, to make us, to give us a place at the table to do our best work and to pitch those initiatives, if you will, that might not see the light of day but for a champion like that. I appreciate him deeply for that.
Well, maybe on that point now, why don't we sort of focus on the library that you manage? I will say by word of introduction to it that I have been in a number of these state law libraries or Supreme Court libraries, or however they're termed in the state, and many of them have facilities that all be envious of what you have. This is a very nice building. It's modern, it's open, it's all the tables and everything are big and wonderful. But it still has a few books, quite a few books. I noticed that too, which is something that state libraries often have in common. Of course, you have the razzle-dazzle of the digital as well. But you want to talk a little bit about the library, more specifically, its scope, sorts of work you do, maybe even some of the people, whatever. It's sort of an open-ended question.
Sure, I appreciate that, and we could go on and on and on, and I won't bore you with all the details, but in 12 years, and I'm starting my 12th year here, we have gone from a very traditional library setting where we had 13, almost 14,000 square feet in a basement with a skylight and a very, very small cadre of paraprofessionals doing work, to a fully professional library staff. There are 8 on staff, 7 lawyers. 5 or 6 of them are, depending upon which job description we're talking about, are also dual degree. And everybody here has a superpower, right? Everybody here has been selected to do the work that they love the best and that they're most accomplished at doing. And it really makes it an enjoyable experience to parse out the work. I will tell you, I talk about this library in 2 ways. I talk about it as the little L library, which is the collection of materials, electronic or print. I talk about it as the big L library, which includes the people, the librarians that make it sing. I know as a former librarian, you would agree with the fact that if you don't have a librarian or a staff, it's really not a library. It's something else. It's
That's right. You ought to be able to manage and help people find things, and that's what the librarians do.
So the traditional library here in Colorado used to be that kind of a library where absolute quiet was required. It's actually still in the statute. We have to take that out because you can't ask a question and get an answer and actually
You're breaking the law
at that point, right? But
the guy broke the law walking through your entry area this morning.
But it serves a higher purpose, right? I mean, we're here to help people who need that help. And to provide a place for them that's safe and pleasant to get that assistance, and the people are the ones that do that. So we're very fortunate to have that going for us, and I always start with the people when I talk about the library. When we do work here, the credit goes to the people who do the work, and as the director, I'm just the one that breaks the bad news, and they keep me insulated from having to do that more often than not.
But actually, that's the mark of a good director, in my opinion. You empower the people with whom you work to do their best.
I'm glad you bring that up. So that's the hook back to the Gallup Strength Finders approach to leadership, and that's the first thing that I did when I got here was I administered that test to everybody on the team to try and find out what their strengths were and how to best match work for them. And in a nutshell, what I'll tell you is my philosophy is largely there's lots of different ways to tease out superpowers and preferences and different ways of matching people to good work. But the bottom line is this: there has to be a shared agreement between administration and the rank and file that we're not looking to take something good and make it better. We're looking to take something and someone excellent and make them elite. We're very fortunate here to be allowed to do our best work.
That's so important. I have seen people in counterpart positions to yours and the one I held, which is directors, somehow think their job is to micromanage to a point where the people below them can't really do what they are best suited to doing.
And that has an attendant problem, right? You can't very well do succession planning if you're busy doing the work that has to be proven up for the next generation of leader, right? So it's just the way that we do things here. And here today, you're walking through this beautiful library, and thank you for the compliment, but the compliment really deserves to be given to the judges who took 3 of the 11 commissioned art projects that were required under the Library Art Act, or the Public Art Act here in Colorado, and they put them in the library for people to enjoy. And the one that I like to call out most specifically is the stained glass windows on the east side of our building. In the morning, the sun shines through there, and it's the history of the written rule of law through the ages selected to remind us that this is a place that has a caretaking role. And it's right next to the books, which is how the law is currently written. Next to that wireless reading room, which is how the law is going to be researched and written in the electronic age to come.
They say we have no concept of what will happen in the future, just as the way you're doing things today is very different than even when I was still active, let alone when I started in the profession.
Well, and we owe you a thank you, to allow us to stand on your shoulders and see what we can see on the horizon, right? and we owe that to the next generation. We have 10% of our collection out in this space, and it warms my heart to hear you say that is a significant number.
Yeah.
But we only have 4,500 square feet in this library now. And so the remainder of the books had to be negotiated, to be placed into a kind of a closed stack downstairs. We have 10,000 square feet there. We didn't lose anything. But it is a different way of showcasing. And what we had to do that was going back to the work that you did. I mean, we kept metrics for 3 years while we were out of pocket and this building was being built to identify the most searched books on the catalog, the most used books left on the table, the books that were most checked out by our judges, and then the ones that we thought filled the gaps of the work that should be done by a state law library. And that's how we arrived at this 10%.
It's interesting. You're sort of swinging back to an earlier era in libraries generally, Dan, in that we all had, at one point in time, closed stacks.
Right.
When I was a student, I worked in a law library that most of the collection was, down in the building and then closed to the public or even the students. And you wanted a book, you'd go to the circulation desk up in the main reading room and order it, and they'd get it for you.
That's right, and that harkens me back to Nevada and the University of Nevada in Reno. They were a regional depository, and when we were doing debate research, we would regularly roll up our sleeves for hours and go through that whole process with the cards and the papers to request those via slip. Right?
Yeah.
And then to have to navigate the different language of the superintendent of documents, classification separate from the Library of Congress or Dewey, like others use, right? And I should call out 2 other mentors at this point too.
Sure.
Tom Sawyer, Thomas W. for Wholesome Sawyer was how we would refer to him. He was our debate coach and turned us on to the value of that kind of research early. And I owe him a great debt, along with my student body advisor, Mike Wellams, who taught me, those 2 gentlemen together taught me the value not only of researching, but also placing that research in the context of civics education and our responsibilities to our communities. And all of that took place in libraries and almost hidden from view until you realize that we get the privilege of doing this job now for other people for that reason, and that we're just a part of the chain. It's great.
It's interesting, your connection to debate and both participating and knowing these people. When I was in my first job out of school, it was down in Houston, the University of Houston, and my boss, Al Coco, had a neighbor who also was on the faculty at the university, and he was the head of the debate program. And he was the source of some of our best student assistants because we always hired his debaters. He would recommend them, and if he recommended them, they were very good people.
And that's a nice compliment to Al. We lost him this year, as you know.
That's right.
He was at DU for a while, or C, I can't remember which one.
Denver University, and had been retired for about 20-some years, but so it's harder to place him when you're newer than that. But yeah, he was very active in our profession, and part of my reason, frankly, for selecting to come to Denver on this trip, I'd been talking about going down to California, and then my son decided to take a couple of weeks off, and we'd make it a little more extensive tour of the Southwest. And I thought, when I came back for Al's memorial service, I started thinking, there are a bunch of colleagues in the Denver area that we'd like to talk to, and why not now? And
well,
so
thank you for
I
that.
sort of swung this way, and I have not regretted one bit of it.
Right?
Except it did snow on the car this overnight a little bit.
But it won't stick.
No, it won't. It was like 70 or 60 degrees yesterday.
Yeah, that's right. Welcome to the Rockies in April.
Exactly, yeah. Well, it sounds like the library is, what types of patrons do you get? I mean, obviously the judges, the clerks, some of the bar probably come by, but they probably don't as much as they did when they were still all book research.
Yeah, you know, that's an interesting transformation. I mean, even in my short tenure here, what used to be a fairly even distribution of clients, back then it was 1/3 government, 1/3 members of the bar, and 1/3 general public. I mean, we have those numbers, you know, going way back. Now, very different. The internet has changed the way in which people get to us. It was hard enough to actually walk through the door in the first place, but now with security post 9/11 and those types of things, we are contacted more by phone and by email. So we serve a more virtual group, which I think is great because it expands our scope and then tees up things like the help center, the virtual help center. But we also now have seen a switch from the type of lawyer that we get short of government. So the judges and their lawyers still come to us, and they're our bread and butter. And in my humble opinion, customer service starts with court support because it's the access to justice, confidence in the rule of law piece that makes everything else matter. And so we're happy to be plugged into that. But lawyers here in Colorado are, it's different than in states where it is a mandatory bar. Here we're not mandatory, and only about half of the licensed attorneys in Colorado belong to the Bar Association, which means that they don't get the benefit then of any of the legal research databases that are negotiated by the association, which means we are their lifeline if they can't afford it on their own. And so a lot of those folks are coming to us virtually, and it is a hope of mine that we will go back to the future and loop back in public libraries in a way to reach people in their communities, starting in 4th grade, 6th grade, whenever we start learning about Colorado civics, all the way up through law school, so that people can have a safe place in their public libraries to have access to these things. And we have a couple of sites that we've identified to do that. We work with the Department of Education. I should mention that we have a learning center, a $2.5 million civics education learning center, which we call Civics on Steroids. It's all touchscreen, it's all interactive, it's the rule of law through the eyes of judges, and so our library runs that, and so we're museum curators at the same time that we're information curators and compilers, and we make that available to people. And on that website for the Judicial Learning Center, we have K through 12 Department of Education sanctioned lesson plans for civics education. And so that's a thing that we do. And so we've enlarged our scope there. We have a member of our staff who's dedicated entirely to giving tours of that space in the building. And in the 4.5 years, almost 5 years that we've been here, we have measured, I mean, it's probably double this, the folks that we haven't captured in our metric, but over 250,000 visitors just to this building. And we all know that folks that can make it to the building are just the tip of the iceberg compared to the folks who are in our scope of service. So we have the opportunity to do a great amount of work with the resources that we've been given, and we're trying to actually deploy them meaningfully.
One of the characteristics of this state, Colorado, I believe, is that, well, I know you have 2 law schools, and they're both relatively close to here in Denver. One's in the city and one's in Boulder, which is practically just next door. And you don't have a system of public law libraries in various counties that I'm aware of, like, say, California or even some of the other states. So you've got to be carrying a lot of the load here from the court library.
That's the driver for why we do things the way that we do, right? So, what's our stock in trade? The judges can't be wrong, and the people appearing in front of the judges deserve the same answers to the same questions that the judges would ask. And so that's the driver for professional staff. You're exactly right. We did used to have a county system. When I came on board, there were 2 left, and they've since been retired for various reasons. Tabor has not been helpful in that way, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. It makes things very, very difficult here for government. And I would mention, most of what I have to say about the work that I do is highly complimentary. But in our space here in Colorado, That one constitutional amendment, Tabor, prevents us, despite the fact that we're public, from actually having a Friends of the Library group, which means we can't take in any money.
Okay.
And filing fees drive everything, and we've had to become very, very good institutionally at the management and deployment and expenditure of the small amount of money we get from filing fees. And that's part of the reason why I feel so strongly about the leadership we've received from Chris Ryan and the court. And I'll take a little bit of credit as well for being frugal and yet being a little bit edgy in terms of how we push those boundaries. Being allowed to do that's been great.
Well, that sounds like the role of the state law librarian, or whatever the title of the era is that you fill. Could we begin to focus now sort of outside of your day job, so to speak, and that is some of your professional service? I noticed in preparing for today that you have been quite active in the Colorado Association of Law Libraries. You've been secretary, they must figure you're a trustworthy type guy, and then president of that, and you've probably done other things. One doesn't usually pick those two jobs exclusively. You want to talk a little bit about some of your professional involvement?
I'm happy to do that. So one of the things that we feel strongly about here in Colorado, in the Guild, is association service, right? Nobody can do it by themselves. We all rely upon each other. It's a robust interlibrary loan group, and frankly, depending upon what type of library collections out there, it's probably dwindling too, but the need is as robust as ever. So association service is really important. One clarification, I started out as the treasurer. I don't know if they would have liked me as secretary, but they did trust me with their money before they made me president, and that was a privilege to do that. And the other thing I'll mention is that here in Colorado, just like in the country, we found the people that we know over the course of time to make the world seem very small. It seems even smaller here, and so everybody who has an idea to improve the practice or the profession is encouraged to do that stuff, and it was just my privilege to be able to have that kind of an opportunity. I will tell you, I am the kind of librarian though that pushes limits, and I'm not popular across the board when I do that, but I do believe that it's a service to the Guild to remind people that we don't want to get stale in what we do.
Well, that's very important, especially with the tremendous changes going on and the way legal information is disseminated.
Right, and some of that is driven by the fact that there's just a reality that we can no longer purchase in multiple formats. Everything that we have traditionally made available to our clientele, top level or general public, right? And so that's been a challenge over time. I think we've navigated that well here. But that's also the segue, if you will, to moving from a state association to a federal one. The American Association of Law Libraries is a tremendous
and you have been
resource.
active there too with the, well, it used to be called State Court and County Law Librarians. Now it's what, public?
It's the Government Law Librarians.
Government Librarians, yeah. I'm still getting used to the new name.
Right, so basically the push for that was, and I was a federal librarian before, and so it resonates with me. We don't want to be exclusive, and we don't want to make it appear as if we only serve a portion of the group, and government law library sections are so small to begin with that we didn't want to forget about our federal colleagues.
Well, the new name seems to be certainly inclusive, and perhaps in a way that the older name couldn't be, because it included a lot, but there might have been a few people that were sort of left off.
Yeah, and I honor that original designation too, though. I don't want to be overly critical. The federal librarians, bless them, have a lot of money, right? The federal government can print it.
Well, yes, but I don't know if it all trickles down from what I've heard from my colleagues.
Well, and we could play tennis on that for a really long time. What I'll tell you is this. We're fortunate to have 8 slots for librarians here.
Yeah.
Right? The largest one that I know of is in Minnesota as a state librarian. They might have, double that. They do a great job there, just reading their library report from last year. But, the 10th Circuit
6 states, over 24 people on their staff.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, as a director with a sharp pencil, I think I could get a little bit more work done with a staff that size, with a scope of service like that.
No doubt, yeah.
But that's the origination, I think, of the exclusivity of state, county law libraries. But now it's, to your point, coming back around where even federal libraries, and especially smaller ones, need exactly what the states always used to have too, and we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
I want to be clear about that. Especially those libraries like the EPA, where they're being consulted out,
Yeah.
or small military ones where they've got such a global mission. We all need to help each other.
That's probably very true. Now, in addition to your sort of traditional professional service, which we've been talking about, you also work on things more for the statewide, good of the state thing, and I'm thinking specifically of your work with the Governor Hickenlooper's Historical Records Advisory Board. I'm reading this to make sure I think I get it right.
You got it.
Do you want to talk about some of that and maybe some of your work as chair of the legislature's Digital Advisory Committee, and that sort of work?
Be pleased to do that. One of the things that I think is transformational in our business these days is that we get to cast a wider net in terms of those that we serve. And for me, the drum that I beat the loudest is civics education. Right? We are teachers have been mentors to me and people like me for all time. And yet we talk about the resource challenges we have, and you can magnify them for those folks. How do they do what they do so well? And so civics education begins with understanding the structure of government. If we're going to be in one branch, in this particular case in Colorado, under the umbrella of the judiciary, how fortunate are we cannot afford, nor should we even consider, being insulated from the other branches of government and the needs that they have. In our statute, this library is beholden, and happily so, to assist the Legislative Council, the Office of Legislative Legal Services, and we extend all of those services to all government. We could talk more about, the way in which we have worked together to negotiate shared legal research databases, save the state $3 million over a 5-year period. We could talk about ways in which we share other things. But the Historical Records Board, in particular, allows us to work with state archives, which has their own challenges because of the digital audio that they're required to maintain and preserve.
Okay.
The legacy sets of equipment over every 10 years, it seems, that have, made it a challenge to be able to recover those on demand. And because the archivist is the titled head of that board, we get a chance to work with History Colorado and the archivists and local folks to give sub-grants to localities to do preservation of materials, and then it comes full circle for civics education. It couldn't be a higher calling, and I'm proud to be part of it. Cycling off this year, so I have to look for something else to do. But
I have a suspicion someone's got your name on their list, and
well, that'd be nice.
you'll be hit up, and you'll say yes.
I will absolutely say yes. There's
Why not?
there's never enough people to feel the need, and our capacity is driven by our desire to help. The Legislative Legal Advisory Board was a special thing. When Colorado was the first state to pass the Uniform Electronic Legal Material Act nationally, we leaned in, and it's always hard to be first, but I was fortunate enough to be made a part of that group and the chair. We wrote a few reports, tried to push things forward as much as we can. It's an ongoing dialogue, but the fact is that we're going to move from print to electronic material. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And by that, what I mean specifically is people in the new generation of researcher believes that everything that they need is online. That's a categorical statement.
There's a standard joke about today's law students right on point on that, and that there's the kid, if I can dare to call them that, they're adults, but to me, they're young, sitting in front of a whole wall of books, with a computer screen in front of them, and if the material is not on that screen, that student doesn't know it exists.
That's exactly right. And I will tell you, I mean, I have very strong feelings about pedagogy and the requirement for it to change, and it's going to come around a lot later in time. And I think government libraries are on the rise as thought leaders in that respect, because we can show people how that works, and I'll tell you exactly how we do it here. But first I want to tell you an example of what you just described. In Colorado, so we go back to 1877 with our statutes,
Mm-hmm.
the year after we became a state. Online, from Westlaw, Lexis, anyone else, the farthest back that our statutes go electronically is 1989. You can't
Wow.
get them earlier than that.
So
At
no
any cost.
retrospective
None.
editions.
Which is why the Uniform Electronic Legal Material Act is so important.
Uh-huh.
In our migration of data in a verifiable, authenticated way, preserving the print upon which, from which we scan it, has to become a part of our future. It must. And I'm a Boy Scout about that. So what else is there, and this is just a tease out later, what else is there that we can be doing and thinking to piggyback on that? But to your point too about, how do we get the word out? What we have to do is go back to the work that you and your colleagues did as directors, and remember that we have to measure those things that matter. And in our particular case, what we do is we keep track here in Colorado of not only the questions that we receive, the categories of clients from whom we receive them, but also the effect of the work that we do. For example, when we were out of pocket here and waiting for this building to be built, we were working out of a 1,500 square foot temporary library. Most of what we did was either in person or virtual. Right? So it was a kind of crucible for the future. And what we learned from that was that if we kept track of the number of questions that we received where Westlaw or Lexis or the monster legal research databases, whom we love and who do great work, couldn't answer those questions, and we could use in books, that was going to be, the tendon that connected bone to muscle as we move forward. And there were cases where certain chambers, in particular our Chief Justice at the time, his chambers asked us 78 times in a fiscal year for a book, because the questions they had in front of them could not be answered by the electronic database. And when you amplify that by the number of chambers that we keep track of, it's a powerful statement with regard to not only the viability of print resources, but also it allows us to then think about how many published opinions were made better because they did that. It's a win-win.
Well, it's interesting to hear that, because being away from the everyday profession, I rely on people like yourself who are not, or who are the experts today, who sort of keep me abreast of what's up. And it's interesting, Dan, the next question on my sort of list for this session was to the future, get your ideas on the future of the libraries, especially those serving in courts like yourself. And I think you've pretty well covered that, but maybe I'll let you have one more look at it if there's anything more you want to add to
Yeah,
what
I
you
appreciate
said.
that. I wax poetic on this a lot with my colleagues, and I think maybe some of them get tired of it, but I'm never going to give up this ghost. I believe strongly in a number of things, Pat. One is we need to run libraries like businesses. Otherwise, we can't get business people to invest in our future, right? If we can't create our own enterprises, which is something I would love to do here to self-sustain ourselves financially, then we're going to have to rely upon the good grace and will of others, and we have to provide value to them. One of the things that I feel needs to be given greater voice is the fact that our people here, our librarians, our brain trust, have a return on investment like wow. And we have to find a way to remind those patrons of ours, and I reserve that word for people who give us money or in some other way champion our cause, to continue to have new and good information to bring to people who might be dubious. And so we need to run like a business, and we need to have marketing, and we need to be out there, and we need to be at the table. I mean, if you are a person like me who believes that you're at the table or you're on the menu, then there's a way right there. Thank you, Elizabeth Warren, for speaking that first.
Yeah.
To accelerate the theme. But that's first and foremost. Second of all, I believe we have to not just compile information, we have to create information. We have to go back to these print materials, categorically put them into context as we move into areas that are evolving in the law, and remind people where we've been and the underlying reason why it was decided in the first place and why the reasons for change might be important. We also have to do things like build relationships in areas that librarians typically didn't occupy. And by that, I mean we need to talk to the municipal leagues and the county or institutions and special districts associations, and share information back and forth, whether it be amicus briefs that we scan for them or research and lobbying that we do together. But they're also in our scope of clients, and we need to think outside of this box that used to be the building that is the library, because the more virtual we become, the larger the number of people we can serve and the greater opportunity we have to do good work together.
That strikes me as extremely important, especially in this day and age, because I'm seeing here and there, and unfortunately a little more here's and there's than years ago, sort of an assumption that people outside of our immediate profession have, that libraries are things of the past. That, you know, books, well, they were books, they're not anything else. They don't appreciate, they don't understand that there's more to it. And even that the books still have so much significant need to have.
That's right, and I think that's one place where, you know, what used to be the Master's in Library Science, which is now the Master's in Library and Information Science, is really a distinction with a very strong reason behind it, because we do both. We take care of both the print and the emerging electronic information. We take care of people that don't even know they need us yet. And to that I would add another anecdote if we have time, and that is simply that people have still, despite our emerging electronic services, which occur everywhere in the country, people still think of librarians as people who have a lot of time to read books.
Yeah.
And what I would say to people is please examine that a little bit more closely, because librarians typically we're not, and I have this written down, and I feel strongly about it too. I feel strongly about a lot of things, you hear me say that, but I really do think we have to have conviction, and a lot of our service grows out of that. Most librarians were not born to librarianship, right? They were born for it, and they discovered it in an interdisciplinary way by doing other things. And those other life experiences make us very strong advocates, not only for the people that we serve, but also for the work that we provide, because we act as verifiers of what people think they know.
Yeah.
And in today's milieu, that's more important than ever.
There is so much out there. You know, wonderful to have all that stuff out there, but unfortunately, you're right. How do you curate what's valid and what isn't?
That's right. And so what we say to people here is, bring us your questions. Yeah. We won't guess. If we know, we will verify what you think you know, and if we don't know, it'll be 2 out of 2 doctors agreeing on that.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I normally, in one of these sessions, never make references like I'm about to, but I have access to the Washington Post through my Kindle, and I enjoy reading, you know, the articles in there. And the one today, the lead article, is about Amazon.com and the problems they're having, being sure that the evaluations by alleged customers of products are valid. And they say this is totally out of control. The companies that produce these things are now manufacturing reviews, and this is happening on other sites as well. And that Amazon is basically trying to figure out how to police those. It's just impossible. But, part of what we do as librarians is with the digital stuff especially, and even to some extent with the books, and we always have. We're trying to put out there what is the valid information, the real information, and not somebody's, for better term, propaganda.
Well, that's right, and to skirt the political side of that and bring it into like the nugget and kernel of what we do as librarians, what I would say is, listen, everyone, right? Where you follow the money, and wouldn't it be great if the Amazons of the world who are facing this problem would actually designate a portion of that money to librarianship to allow us to assist them in this transition to machine-read and machine-created information, because they're separate things, and machine should be a tool.
Yeah.
And if people do not understand, and they currently do not understand, the algorithms or the metadata creation or subjective application of that metadata to the information, then the definition of what is vital, what is real, what is reliable and provable becomes impossible. And our space is all about decoding that. And I think the creation of what we do in the future, even if it's recompiling something and then teaching others how to use it in a better, different way through indexing electronically or print, is alive and well, and it's an old skill and it needs to be revived.
Well, maybe on that, I should mention that we're probably nearing the end of our conversation this morning, Dan. But before we do, it's my custom to ask, because sometimes people have other things they want to bring up. If there's anything we've not talked about that you'd like to mention, or if you wanted to expand on something perhaps we have discussed.
Thank you for that opportunity, Pat. I mean, we have talked around a lot of the notes that I made for this question, but I would say a couple of other things. One, government libraries in particular need to be more transparent in the future. That goes hand in hand with understanding structure of government, and when we do that, if we also couple that with being more demanding about the quality of the work that libraries produce, I think it's going to end up having a good effect. We'll end up being more egalitarian, the rule of law will have greater confidence, and that will serve everyone better. We need to celebrate the gifts that we as librarians have been given, and then amplify or increase that in the sharing back of that information. The access to justice space is a perfect example. If we can collaborate with bar associations and access to justice groups, we can do more with more. There's a comment that was made out there in that space recently, and so I'm not the person that coined this, but I'm going to share it here through restatement. And one of those things is that lawyers in particular, but I would extend it to law librarians as well, we need to stop trying to monopolize service that we don't provide. There's enough space out there for everybody to work together to do what they do best in tandem to fill the gaps that are not currently being satisfied. The capacity is huge, and none of us can do it by ourselves. And with that respect, I would say, when we're in it together, by thinking outside the box and working collaboratively, there's never enough hours in a day, but if we can chip away at that, we can leave it better than we found it. And I do believe that the curiosity that exists in the heart and mind of every librarian is one of our strengths. And that if we can never quit doing good or trying to do better, then we will have left it better than we found it and done good service just like everybody that came before us. And with that, I would say, if you have no other questions, I want to say thank you to every librarian who's out there doing good work, especially those that are keeping hope alive for people who have no other hope except that they can walk through a library door. I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to give that work this voice.
Well, I want to thank you too, Dan, for contributing to our history and taking the time to allow me to come here to the court library and talk with you, and we're going to talk with one of your colleagues in a few minutes. And in thanking you, I'm doing it, of course, not just on my behalf, since I've had the fun of the privilege of coming, but also on behalf of Michelle Wu, Frank Hodak and Dick Spinelli, our colleagues with whom I have been working for now about 6 years to put together this oral history of our profession, law librarianship, for the Hein Online database. Thank you.